When you do a PhD, you quickly realize that nobody is coming to the rescue. If you do anything that is difficult in your life, that is solely up to you, and that you have to get this thing done, you realize that nobody is there, right? You get crickets, and it's up to you to keep the thing going. I'm really curious what motivates you in these particular moments. I know a lot of people can't do it, but what gets you going? What is the thing that allows you to get back up and to do it again, despite the fact that it often doesn't feel good, right? I'm very curious about that. No, and then there's another element on that, and if you could leave comments, I would love to learn and understand. So there is a framing that you feel stuck, and so you just stay with this thing, you kinda keep grinding it, and it doesn't feel good. What things in your life motivates you so that you do it and you get an enormous amount of pleasure from it? And I know that, I've talked about this a lot of times. Sometimes you get the pleasure from the grind, from actually going through it and going through that suffering. I deeply believe that a lot of a pleasure we get in life is through suffering, um, and the sort of misery of it. And I know that feels it makes me feel like icky because there's been leaders in this world in the past that sort of used that as justification for um, just to be jerks or, ruthless or heinous or whatever, right? Like I know that that is deeply part of this. Um, But there is something to do with grinding things out and then accomplishing something that you get pleasure from that. But what gets you going regardless, right? Without any of that validation um, of like proving to the outside world that you could do this, um, all of those things. What is it that gets you going and makes you feel like it's joyous? And I think that I'm really curious about that because I think that I really want to put this as mechanisms within the reciprocity platform. I think that the idea of doing a PhD for most people is horrible, right? I think that's why people stay away from it, both when they get into it, and I tell people this straight off the get-go, right? Like, don't do a PhD. I think that's like it's insanity. Unless you're ready for the insanity of it all, you're doing something that you're gonna get underpaid for, that you can get often very little respect. Nobody and that is true within in the industry as well, right? Like, everybody disrespects everybody else's research because their research is so much better. Um, like, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes that makes it very difficult to get back up and to do it again, and you are positioned in this sort of competition, this gladiator competition where the best one is whatever the hell that means, is gonna win, um, and that's the conversation, that's everything, that's the entire conversation, but I think that that is extremely demotivating for a lot of people. So I am very curious about, what gets you going for things not and I don't want it if you've done a PhD, you understand you could probably put some you could talk about that. Um, but if you haven't done one or, even if you're just so tired of it, um, what are the things in your life that you do for for pleasure that everybody looks at you and they're like, "Meh, like that's not for me." Why do you do those things? I'm very curious about this because I think that's often at the heart of a lot of things, right? Like this whole reciprocity project, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and it's insanity. The whole thing is insanity. I'm spending a god awful amount of money. Now you could say that, that there's a potential prize at the end, and that's what motivates me. That's possible. But I've been doing this for 8 years now. And um, that seems much more unlikely to me. Let's just say that. Most people would have quit. Most people would have like said, nah, uh, this is dumb. You're wasting all this money. You're wasting all this time. Don't do it. So I understand. And what motivates me and what gets me going, at least from my perspective, is I cannot view this as work, right? If I view it as work, I don't want to do it as much, right? I've got actually a couple of videos. We went on a family vacation and they're sitting there. I don't want to actually put those things together because that it's a little bit more work than having just simple conversations with you. And I don't want to do those things at all, right? But I'll probably do them. I'll get around to them. But I just, it doesn't make me want to do something. So what is it in, like, for me, that's why I'm really curious about what you think. For me, it's if I view it as play, if I view it as like I'm just playing around, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I'm gonna just mess around with this and try to figure things out and goof around, right? Like I'm just gonna tinker at something until something kind of clicks. That's one thing that helps me. Another thing that deeply in it's more of an inspiration is viewing this as like charity, where if I don't do it, who the hell is? Right? Like nobody else is stepping up and doing this. And so I need to sort of do this, right? Like I have the wherewithal. I'm an engineer and I did a PhD. It was a grind. Um and I've got we have the resources to expend on this at this moment to build something like this. So it's like charity. It really is, right? Like if you've ever done this, I want you to sort of imagine this. I've talked about this many times before. Imagine it as wasting your time and resources. If you can get joy somehow wasting your time and resources, then you're likely to do this, right? And it's totally different logic. It is not the same thing as what the whole world talks about. Um, why do you do these things, right? Like, um, why do I why do I go for walks every day? Part of it is like this underlying, um, it's a health thing, right? If I don't do it, I'm gonna die. God's gonna strike me down, that kind of thing. But also is at the end of it, I feel a little better. It's a little bit like a drug, right? Like a treatment. But then part of it's also like a little bit of insanity of like, I just did this because I did it yesterday. And I think all of these things are really interesting, right? Like there's so many things that we do in our life that are completely irrelevant, that have no productive value. And yet, productive value as somebody that studies business would understand. And yet we all do it. And I'm really curious about that. Like, what are these things, particularly the ones that are miserable? Um, like if you were to look at that and you're just like, I don't want to do this. Why do we do this? Right? Like what motivates us? And then on top of it, what gives us joy from doing it? Right? Cleaning the bathroom is one of those things. I kind of like cleaning the bathroom. And that was always my escape for a long time, was cleaning the bathroom when my kids were little. Um, Now we have somebody that helps us out with doing those things. But for a long time, I cleaned my own bathroom for years and years and years, right? Like decades. Um, which is, like, but I kind of enjoyed it. Or doing the dishes, right? I do the dishes every night. It's mindless. It's kind of like turns my brain off. It's very therapeutic. Um, why do I enjoy that? I don't know. I'm curious about the things that you have or you do that are from the outside world, people would say, hey, that's misery or that's a waste of time or, it's negative connotations, but you do it anyways. But then on top of it, what gives you joy? Like, what are the things you do? These things that are miserable, but they give you joy. I'm just, I'm deeply, deeply curious about that because I want to understand how I could build a mechanism into the reciprocity platform to make it work so it becomes more enjoyable for everybody to do something, to do research, to do something that is just ugh, right? Like everybody understands the ugh of writing an essay. I'm curious. What do you have to say? All right, take care.